You're listening to CAAT Tales, the podcast of SLC Faculty Local 417, your union connection. Each episode, we bring you real stories from our members, practical tips on your rights, and the kind of information that helps us all move forward.
Welcome back to CAAT Tales. I'm your host, Julie White. This episode brings together conversations that sit right at the intersection of belonging, research, and the financial realities facing our students. In this month's Belonging at the Table segment, host Ekta Singh sits down with Dr. Maha Othman, researcher, educator, mentor, and long-standing member of the SLC community. Their conversation moves through identity, faith, and the rhythms of Ramadan. It's a beautiful look at how culture and practice shape the way we can show up in our work and in our classrooms. From there, we turn to applied research. You may have seen Julie Dyke and Andrea Rochon in the news recently after receiving a grant through NSERC. We're going to talk to them about what they're building, what the funding makes possible, and, importantly, what they learned in the process. If you've been sitting on an idea or imagining a project of your own, their insights may be exactly what you need to take the next step towards securing support. And finally, we shift into the financial landscape being navigated by our students. Local 417 Communications Officer Christina Chrysler sits down with Financial Aid Advisor Kyle Valpy from Local 418, who's going to help us unpack the Ford government's February 12th announcement related to OSAP and what the shift from grants to loans could mean for our students and how they're feeling the impact. So let's get into that conversation with Kyle and Christina. Okay, so Christina, do you want to walk us through a little bit about what we're hearing? I know we've talked to you and Christina DeCarry on the Fine Print Forum earlier.
Yeah, so if listeners recall, the Ford government announced that they would be shifting the OSAP grant percentage from 85 to 25%, meaning that that 75% of the money received would translate into loan versus grant. And of course, we don't know the details. And this is just an announcement and just enough to stir up some controversy, I suppose, until we know in the fall. But the reaction, certainly from the students that I've seen and online, has been massive. We know that there is a Save OSAP campaign. The Canadian Federation of Students, the Ontario chapter, has said that it's a devastating blow for students and are, of course, advocating and beginning to formulate rallies and kind of the student end of things. So we're going to see some organizing happening on that side. I'm really hopeful, Kyle, maybe you can shed some light or define for people who are unfamiliar with loans, like how much of a student loan is actually Ontario loan versus federal loan. Maybe it'd be helpful to create some distinction there because this isn't necessarily impacting federal funds.
Certainly. And I can speak to this year for the 25-26 OSAP application. As most people are aware, you do apply for OSAP every year because of changes that could be implemented, such as the upcoming for 26-27. But in the current model of OSAP, when it determines financial need and the assessment of funding, it's actually more federal heavy than provincial. So federal assesses your financial need first and determines grants and loans there. And then the provincial kind of piggybacks off of what the federal portion of grants and loans are being assessed on the OSAP application. So typically, and there's always a depends and your actual student status with OSAP and how your funding is determined, but most of the time it is more federal grants and loans than provincial grants and loans that you would see on an application from OSAP.
Okay. Are you getting questions now from students who have OSAP and for hopeful students coming into the college? What are you hearing?
Certainly. So our model for financial aid, we help out in all avenues. So of course there's phone and email, but in student services at the front of campus, we accept drop-ins all the time. People usually are quite surprised that we don't do by appointment. We'll just come on in, first come, first serve. And usually you're not waiting that long at all. And of course we develop rapport with certain students that we see quite frequently. But overall, especially if you're a student in the first year of study, maybe you're in the second or third of a 4-year program, there's worry because you were getting used to the amount of OSAP that you were getting this year and in previous years as well. And kind of to speak candidly, the OSAP model right now, I mean, given the entire state of the country, doesn't necessarily match the inflation for living allowance. So students were already in a concern in the current model because the living allowance that they're getting from OSAP isn't necessarily meeting their financial needs. So it can sometimes put a student into the position of being in a financial hardship. So they are asking these questions and trying to get ahead of it as best they can, but without, further details or the OSAP application being launched, we can't necessarily answer those questions to say how different your funding would look for the upcoming year. But certainly, definitely some worry and some concern, and at least they're touching base to know to ask those questions.
Are you hearing from students who are worried about, I don't know if I can afford to attend my next year of education?
So that's a normal portion of our jobs. Definitely, there's students in that position regardless of the upcoming changes of OSAP. But is it a bigger concern now and part of the decision making process of maybe coming for your first year of study in the fall or returning? Certainly, because it is the more or less the first decision a student makes before coming to school is can I afford it? Timing doesn't necessarily align all the time. And so, like if you're accepting an offer in February, you can't apply for OSAP till the spring, which usually means end of April, early May. A returning student might have more time because they kind of make those decisions over the summer, which is nice. So apply for OSAP as early as possible to kind of get your ducks in a row and know the funding that's available to you as well. But certainly, I would even put it before their studies, they're probably worrying about money first. I mean, that's probably human nature in a sense, but certainly it's front of mind for all of our students, and they'll continue to open those channels of communication and hopefully come see us as soon as the application's launched and we begin to get more information and data how that pertains to the impacts on funding.
And you're in the Kingston campus?
Correct.
And do you know if there's kind of similar responses and reactions with the Cornwall and Brockville campuses as well?
There certainly is. We operate as a tri-campus team, which is lovely, especially given the current state. Honestly, if you want a blessing from COVID, that brought us closer as a financial aid office to deliver to our students as well, because sometimes we would do a little bit of a different model. Of course, they are technically different schools in the eye of OSAP being on a different campus. But we speak quite frequently, if not daily, about how this impacts students and align how we not only communicate with our students, but how we're processing applications and inquiries of that nature as well, too. But
Okay, Christina, what are you hearing?
I mean, it's pretty new. What I would say is online, there's a lot of remarks that are, from student government and not necessarily ours, but groups that represent students, really commenting that the government is stabilizing the post-secondary system on the backs of low-income students. And I mean, I said before when we talked about it, it's a poor tax. It's impacting the people who need it the most, which is why I kind of opened with asking clarification around the federal and provincial, balance there. So all hope is not lost there, hopefully.
And I hope it does stay that way too. Of course, it's always subject to change because
know.
as of right now, they haven't announced any federal changes. This is the provincial side coming out too, but that is some hope, yes.
Yeah, I think the main thing is reminding students that there are other sources available within the college that can assist them as well. It may not be in the form of direct cash, but there might be things that can help ease their living situation. And that already exists. So our student emergency funds and providing, I know, Kyle, your office on Brockville campus is giving out grocery cards when needed. And same with student association who have food banks and personal care items. And, that's not direct funds, but that helps alleviate some of those things too. We also have the career services on our campuses to help connect people with jobs that can hopefully help support them. We also have student bursaries that people often forget to even apply for. It's one application, just fill it out, for heaven's sakes, it's free money. And if you're someone who's in the position of qualifying for OSAP, you are probably in the position of qualifying for these bursaries as well. So, there are things that people can do in addition to OSAP to help support their efforts.
Absolutely. That's just music to my ears. I always have like goosebumps hearing that too. If you say go to the financial aid office, that's everything that will like rhyme off to assist students too. So to hear that from a faculty member, which unfortunately in our position, we don't necessarily communicate directly. It's usually between a student. So that's lovely to hear, Christina. So that's fantastic that you relay students to these services as well. Something that was new and launched this year, and it kind of started at last year's open house, is the entrance bursary. There's also other, especially if you attend open house, there might be like a large tuition credit prize as well too. So just a quick plug to please attend your open house, especially as a entering student, if faculty can promote that too, if they're connecting with incoming new students. The entrance bursary is for a student entering first year. Normally it's like $1,000 bursary that goes right towards tuition. So that's something that can assist too, because to your point, if you have a financial need with OSAP and if you're entering a first year of that program, then if you show that financial need, you might qualify for that entrance bursary as well too. There's a myth that I always like to debunk too, is that if I get OSAP, I'm no longer able to work. Like I can't work part-time or whatnot. Absolutely not the case. There are thresholds. Like if you're making 50 to 100,000s of dollars, then yes, that would affect your OSAP funding certainly. But for like a standard September to April study period, if you're making under the $11,200 was the threshold this year, that usually doesn't even affect your OSAP funding. So not necessarily a bonus, obviously, to help you out with all your educational and living costs during your study period, but we try to debunk that myth as much as possible, relay students to career services too. So if you're able to work part-time, use that service to brush up your resume and interview skills, and certainly do that if you can handle working along with full-time studies.
And just the jobs on campus, we don't have as many as we used to. I mean,
Right.
Kingston certainly would have more than the smaller campuses, and they have reduced in quantity. But I mean, the whole purpose of those roles is that they work around your schedule, right? It's the ideal student role because it's literally working around your schedule and you're already in the building.
It's supposed to be a win-win, yeah. And hopefully, ideally, if it's in your discipline too, you're getting the experience while getting paid all in the same spot. It should hopefully check a lot of boxes.
Kyle, to your earlier point, faculty aren't always aware, but faculty definitely can support students in being aware of what we have and promoting it within their classrooms.
Even if you just say that's where the financial aid office, please go see those folks, because there is tons of other avenues that we could potentially assist with a student too. You made the point of like, especially we don't want anyone to go hungry. Come see us. We're here to help. Certainly, especially priority usually is OSAP, and we'll always look at that first to see if we can get something adjusted to potentially assist the student too. But there are other financial aid options available too. What we like to do when we meet with a student is bring up the application and ask like prying questions, like, did you input this information correctly? They have a nice tool on it as well too, funding mechanisms or instruments that a student's not being assessed for. So you can ask those prying questions to see if that's applicable. Prime example would be like, disability status was no, so you're not being considered for that funding. And when you say that, like going down the list, they might say, oh, well, I might be considered for that. Can I see the documentation? And that might assist the student in that manner too. But more often than not, they might not be claiming their siblings, or they double reported their parents' income. So these type of things increase their financial need, meaning less OSAP funding that's available to them. So it's always usually worth a visit just to have a financial aid advisor take a look at their application to make sure they're being assessed the correct amount of funding from OSAP based on the data actually being accurate for their situation. Because yes, OSAP applications are written in English in question, but it is OSAP language. So it's nice to come see someone that speaks that language every day and have those questions be answered and potentially further assist.
Percentage of domestic students would apply for OSAP. Do you have any idea?
I do. I mean, insider baseball. Long story short, 65% of our domestic students apply for OSAP, and that could be closer to the number of actually receiving funding. It might be a little lower, like 60% actually gets funding. But from an indicating standpoint from student accounts, roughly 65% of our domestic students do apply for OSAP funding as of the last semester, fall 2025.
Really surprising to me. I would have thought it was slightly higher.
I would have too as well. A lot of people, I think, are like often go, I wouldn't qualify for OSAP. Please let the system tell you. Like,
yeah.
It's free to apply. Let it assess you for your information and have the system tell you it's $0 that you're qualifying for. And even if that's the case, if you get a $0 assessment, please come see us, because it could be like that example I just gave you of just incorrect data being pulled too. But let the system tell you, like, sure, you might even be assessed for just loan funding and you can say no to that, but you might be, I mean, this year and next year might be a different story. But when you apply and you get assessed for both grant and loan, students did have the possibility to just take grant funding only. So like quote unquote free money, as long as everything goes well in their studies too. But yeah, I think, and that was the same number in 2019. I don't know if they had data before that too, but it seems to be pretty average for St. Lawrence College, is roughly about 65% of our population applying for OSAP.
Okay. And does that maybe speak to kind of the cutoff, like for a family income?
Yeah, that does happen, and it's the same kind of idea as like, we're not going to apply because our family income is 120 or 150,000. No, please still apply. Like even when you get to like 200,000 as a family income, I would still tell you to apply. At the end of the day, let the system tell you no, because there could be a certain variable, a certain cost within a program or that student's living situation that might make them eligible for funding. Granted, it might be only loan funding, especially next year, given the changes that are coming. But I would still always tell someone to apply regardless if you already are assuming our family income is this high.
The changes in just, economics for everyone, regardless, student to just daily living expenses. And as you mentioned, and we've talked about before, OSAP has not really kept pace with inflation, as many government related things, the same situation. Have you noticed an increase in students requesting assistance from our student emergency funds or using that?
Certainly. So it's always open. I guess I'll lead with that too. So we've taken in a model. It used to be called the hardship bursary, and how students applies through slc.me. It's always available there. But from a numbers perspective, it's always been something that students do apply for. And again, it used to be called the hardship. Now it's the financial needs bursary, just to kind of revamp it in the sense that of the change in the world too, that it's not necessarily just a hardship, but people do have financial needs. That application always remains open. Students can apply. Financial aid advisor from that specific campus will take a look at it, and we work directly with the student to determine that financial need. It's usually, again, that kind of review of the OSAP application, because ideally they're an OSAP student as well. You do need to be an OSAP student to apply for that. But we also have the financial aid office has a really good relationship with our awards office. So that's like internal donor funding, for example, and they have something along those lines of emergency funding for higher need kind of student situations too. So that comes through us. And like I said, we have a great relationship with our awards office. So like if a student is in, unfortunately, like that would be a hardship, or things are available to assist a student in need.
All right. Any predictions with the 2% increases that are going to be allowed in tuition for each of the next 3 years?
I can't say that I've heard anything. I guess if I answered that personally, I'd be hard pressed to see any college not raise it by the 2% each year that they've allowed that. The tuition amount's been the same since 2017. It's almost kind of like an ongoing joke that everyone knows the amount of tuition for most domestic programs. So it'll probably be quite eye opening for us to be like, oh, it's not that $13.61 per semester anymore. It's gone up that 2%. So no insider baseball or something from a college perspective on that at this time, but I'd be hard pressed to see if any college, especially St. Lawrence College, doesn't go up by that 2% cap and have things be adjusted that way. But that seems to be the nature of this change, is that government's allowed that 2% tuition raise. And to accommodate that, yes, we'll still give you OSAP funding, but it's going to be in the form of this loan, essentially, to counteract the cost. So yes, OSAP will still assist with paying with your costs for schooling, but it's going to be loan. And then that's the major concern for these students is, sure, I'll be getting the funds that are available to me, but I'll be coming out of studies with a high load of debt, unfortunately.
Okay, so no insider baseball necessarily, but I'm sure there's a political aspect. Christina, this announcement came out at the same time that Ford was announcing the funding for the system, the $6.4 billion.
It's kind of typical though, right? Like we're going to give you all this money. Look over here. We're giving you all this money. And then, oh yeah, but we're going to make the poor people suffer more. That's pretty standard, I think. It's unfortunate, but I think the plus side of this, and because I have said repeatedly, people aren't angry enough, this makes people angry. And because now we're not just messing with programs that are available and program options, and it's not just greedy teachers and whatever. It's 60% of students are being directly impacted by both the tuition increase, which we did need. We have not had tuition increases, I think, in like 10 years or something ridiculous like that. And we're already the lowest. And St. Lawrence is the lowest, I think, or one of the lowest, So, I mean, we're like, keep kind of going down that list. So we did need something there. It's just to put that hand in hand with making this change to OSAP is really damaging at a time when we as a province and as a country should be educating our population, should be building up so that we are resilient, so that we can do a lot of the things in-house, right? That we're trying to do, that we've been relying on global partners for, and we're seeing that shift. Kyle, I have a question for you. And maybe this puts you on the spot a bit, but if someone in, the highest powers here came to you specifically and said, Kyle, we trust your expertise. What change would you want to see made to OSAP?
Wow. Yeah. Do you want a whole list? To start on a positive note, they do change the wording every year in an OSAP application to make it more simplified, or like actually English everyday type of language, and even to the point to even simplify it even more. The majority of an OSAP application is yes or no questions, which from like a user standpoint, that's ideal because that way there's less, errors with numbers and that sort of thing. But the main thing that we would love to see, which doesn't seem to be a possibility, is just have OSAP keep up with the cost of living, unfortunately. So like students they pay their tuition, they get their books and equipment, and then they just have enough for rent. And then it sounds awful, but we would support for food. Like that's a huge thing in our realm, is that people ensure that they can continue to go to school, they have a roof over their head, but then they go hungry. So that's one of the main things that we would always see in financial aid, is have it keep up with cost of living, just to help out with these, like the grocery prices are supposed to help you in the here and now for your studies. But the students that they come in the first year, maybe they're living on residence too, which of course is even more than rent or living free at home, and they don't have these monies for food. So that's probably the first thing that any financial aid advisor would tell you, is keep up with the cost of living so that students, can afford just basic living beyond that. And that's the main uproar in this change too, is, and the concern is there might not even be enough funding, and even if there is enough funding, students are going to have to pay it all back and be set behind the 8 ball as soon as they're done their studies. So that's probably the first and foremost that we would say.
You can't learn when you're hungry, and you can't learn when you're worried about keeping the roof over your head and those kinds of things. And then, this doesn't so much impact you, Kyle, but, one thing that we're constantly discussing is timetables, So if you have really unreasonable timetables where you can't hold a job to help pay for you, and it's like this vicious cycle of unnecessary stress, and we can help remove a lot of those barriers just within our own institution if we choose to make that a priority.
Definitely apply for that entrance bursary. But overall, if any student is experiencing a financial hardship, please direct them to the financial aid office. That's literally our role, and we're here to support students as best we can, to have them not just focus on their money, but of course everything else that encompasses their life. Mainly the real reason that they're here with us is to complete their studies and get their credential.
Grab a cup of coffee and pull up a chair. It's time for Belonging at the Table with host Ekta Singh.
Welcome officially to another segment of Belonging at the Table. We're so excited to welcome our second guest of this segment. This month, we are speaking with a long-standing member of the SLC community, an award-winning researcher, public speaker, professor, mentor, leader, community advocate, and just all general supportive and kind and caring human being. I am so thrilled to welcome Dr. Maha Othman to our segment show, Belonging at the Table. Welcome, Dr. Maha. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you, Ekta, for this very generous introduction and kind invite. I'm so excited to be on the show with you today and speaking to our listeners here.
Well, we're so excited to have some time with you to chat and to get to know more about the woman behind the doctor. So I wondered if you could just start first by please telling us and our audience a little bit about yourself and about your personal and your professional background.
Sure. So I'm a clinical pathologist and a research scientist who was trained in Egypt. And I've spent much of my career studying thrombosis, which is blood clots. I did also bleeding disorders, and I kept advocating for women's health all the way through. I'm also invested in teaching and learning. This is a big part of who I am. And the third major part is really mentorship. I do invest a lot of time in mentorship of trainees at various stages of their career. And I like to build collaborative network for research and for teaching and learning. And I do this at a national and international level. And this has given me a lot of friends across the globe, really, which I'm happy with. But beyond my professional life, I'm a Muslim woman who grew up in a highly educated family with a strong sense of faith, morals, responsibility. These were big things that were in our house, and they were instilled in myself and my siblings. Mm-hmm. Islam is not really separate from who I am and my professional identity. In fact, it does shape how I think, how I operate, how I lead, how I mentor, and how I interact generally with people with integrity, compassion, and accountability. Those are really core values that I was brought up with, and also they are in my faith, Islam. Ramadan in particular reminds me every year to realign my work, my intention, my interactions with the values that I grew up with.
Thank you, Maha. Can you tell us, when did you come to Kingston?
So I've lived in Kingston mostly all my life in Canada, and that's about 28 years now.
Wow.
I came first as a researcher at Queen's University with a postdoctoral training at a Center of Excellence here at Queen's. And then I became aware of the St. Lawrence College Bachelor of Sciences in Nursing, which was very attractive to me. And it seems a perfect fit to my credentials as a physician trained outside of Canada and know something about science and how to help and support those undergrad nursing students. And I've been teaching with the program since 2005, since the start of this full university degree program at SLC. I spent some time in the Brockville campus and sometimes here in Kingston. And now, for years now, I've been full-time here in Kingston.
Wonderful. So Kingston is home.
It is home, yes, for both research and teaching.
Teaching. Wonderful. So this podcast segment is called Belonging at the Table. So we try to infuse threads about home and connection to memories around food, connection, the table. So I invite you now, when you think about home, what is one food or drink or kitchen smell that feels like yours? And what's a story that lives inside of it?
I like that question. The aroma of soup.
Okay.
The aroma of soup simmering just before sunset instantly feels like home to me. This was always the first thing on the table when we broke our fast. And after a long day of fasting, that first sip is critical. And it wasn't just about hunger. It was about gratitude. It about that satisfaction that you've completed the day, you've really finished the task successfully. But even before food or drink, it's the Quran recitation, the special Quran recitation before Maghrib Adhan, which means the call for prayer. This signals the start of iftar, which is breaking fast. And Quran recitation is not simply reading a text out loud. It really follows precise rules and complex rules sometimes of pronunciation and melody, which really, if done by a trained reciter, we call them qari', it becomes deeply moving. Even for those who don't understand Arabic, the sound has special rhythmic, almost musical quality, but in an act of worship rather than performance.
Maha, I don't know if you know this, but my family and I lived in Kuwait for 3 years as a family, and I lived there by myself for 3 years when I was just finished university. And I remember being being in the streets during Ramadan and listening to the call of prayer, and just how powerful and, like you're saying, rhythmic and meditative as well. So I do remember, no matter where we were, out and about in the streets or at home or out shopping, we would be stopped and just, invited to just pause and reflect and listen. And that call to prayer is so powerful.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. It's all across the Muslim nations. But I must tell you that I'm biased towards the Egyptian reciters in particular, because they have mastery of tone and vocal control over things. And they really give you that reflective atmosphere that transforms who you are, especially if you focus on the meanings, and the recitation style itself helps you focus on the meaning. But what's so unique about iftar time is that quiet anticipation, listening to the Quran first before the call for prayer. And no matter how busy people are, everybody just pause and listen, waiting for that iftar moment. And it's a special moment every day for 30 days.
Right. So you talked about a soup. Tell us more. What's in that delicious sounding soup?
Okay, so there are a variety of things. Every day could be something, but noodle soup was a big one. Lentil soup is another as well. Vegetable soup, sometimes vegetable mix. But it's really the idea of having something warm that starts, as a scientist and a physician, your gastrointestinal tract is really empty for long hours. And having something soothing that is warm is really a good feeling. And in addition, some people prefer to have those sweetie dates and sweetie drinks that, nourish them and give them that energy right away. So this is also just as good, but I always preferred the soup.
The soup. Well, it sounds lovely and indeed very, very nourishing. So, you have touched upon many concepts and moments of importance related to the month of Ramadan. And we know that Ramadan started in the end of February and will be continuing here in March. So, when we talk about Ramadan or, Islamic Heritage Month as well, what does that feel and sound like in your own home? And, what rhythms of Ramadan shape your day?
Right. This is an important question because I must say that Ramadan definitely has a different rhythm. The day begins with the dawn and a quiet meal and a prayer. The nights feel very sacred, often filled with prayers, either in congregation or individual level. Lots of moments of deep reflection, lots of dua throughout the night. But overall, it's an opportunity to pause and reflect and try to improve yourself, reset that habit, refine that character, soften your heart, even renew the sense of purpose in ways that are supposed to stay with you beyond the month. So let me tell you, during the day, there's always that heightened awareness of what I say, my intention, how I look at others, how I treat people. It's not only fasting for food and drink like many people think, it's really fasting from bad language, distraction, ego, even
Oh, wow.
impatience, any sort of harm, really. And the idea is if you do that sincerely for a month, every day, there's always that high level of practice self-control that should become natural afterwards. And that
Right.
is the part of the day. At sunset, the collective pause, and then the prayer, then a nice meal, and then you have evening prayer, and then you go back to the night prayers and you continue the rhythm again. So it's really about a very special program that
Mhm.
collectively would allow you not to only abstain, but it's actually about, refreshing and rejuvenating who you are and becoming better.
Right. So a beautiful focus on self-reflection and self-growth. With this discipline of fasting and of, the rhythm of your day being different, how do fasting, prayer, the evening community iftar time, interact with the busy life of being a researcher, of being a professor, of being a mentor with the grading and the meetings? How do you balance that and how do you approach that during this significant time of pause and quiet moments of also reflection?
Well, thank you for this kind question. So, of course, without a doubt, it requires intentional planning and organization. Fasting can be physically demanding, especially if it
Mhm.
falls in long summer days. So, what I do is I try to schedule strategically. I have to
Right.
place more cognitively demanding tasks very early in the day if I can, or in the evening after I have something to eat. The evening community iftars are great and nourishing, but they also eat up your night, which is not too long. And
Right.
with the additional prayer, sleep becomes an issue and becomes very precious. That's why we sleep less hours during those days or month and become a little bit tired compared to other months or weeks in the year. But overall, it actually, believe it or not, it sharpens my time management. I've always find it help me force clarity, organization, increase focus, and
Mhm.
remove that distraction that, believe it or not, happens from food or at different times during the day. So you find yourself really lighter and more productive. That's always the experience overall.
And Maha, may I ask, when you're approaching Ramadan and you know that your next 30 days is going to look and sound different, are you open with sharing with your students, with your colleagues? Do you talk about it ahead of time to kind of create that awareness, or do you kind of keep it more quiet to to yourself and sort of your own day-to-day actions?
That's a very good question, actually. So my students know just because I teach long hours, I have to tell them.
Right.
And I've also, I have two purposes of from telling them, making them aware that this is a month of fasting and whatnot. And most of the time they are aware. So it's not a surprise to anyone. In fact, some people know ahead of time. And the
Right.
second is to, show or inspire them that really productivity and activity is not related to food at all times. And hopefully when they see me active and productive, that gives them a sense of, help them with the resilience. They have a lot long hours of studying and work, and it becomes tedious on their side as well. So I just want to inspire them by telling them I'm fasting.
That's great. That's beautiful. So in that spirit, let's talk about the college now and observing Ramadan while being a faculty member at the college. Can you recall a moment at SLC when your spiritual needs were beautifully honored? And then on the flip side, can you also recall a moment perhaps when they weren't?
Yeah, thank you for this kind question. So I must start saying that SLC community has always been welcoming and generous overall. From over 20 years now, I'm in the college. But I would highlight the elegant space for prayers that we have up in the second floor here on the Kingston campus. It's very accessible, really signals, a sense of belonging. And we were very happy when this space was created and equipped in that level of elegance. So I'm really grateful for that. So another thing is when a colleague simply notice this is the start of Ramadan, or they say, "Oh, next week is Ramadan," or "Today is the day one." I really feel that people at least are aware, are paying attention. So that's always meaningful. But on the other hand, there have been moments of invisibility. For example, when an important half or full day meeting is scheduled during fasting days with
Right.
lunch served and drinks throughout, that's not amazing. And,
Yeah.
we know it's not intentional and, it's not meant to be, but it just reflects how easily minority rhythms within an institution can be overlooked and, highlights the importance of awareness. So overall, I think people know about Ramadan very well, but with busy life, people forget. And,
Right.
nowadays, especially after COVID era, we get very few people to actually acknowledge even the presence of the month, even colleagues, which is really sad, but
Yeah.
perhaps people need to be more aware.
I think that's a really important point you mentioned. I know in my classes, I try to, whether we have Muslim students or not, just try to create awareness, as you said, to, let people know that we are, like many colleagues and students at SLC will be starting Ramadan, and here are some, suggestions to be supportive. So I do agree with you that the awareness piece, I think, is the first step in creating those spaces to feel honored.
Absolutely.
So as as a faculty union, we're all part of the SLC Local 417. As a union, what might you suggest that the union could adopt or approach to better support Muslim faculty and students? What suggestions might you share?
Well, this is a very important question, and I appreciate your asking that. I think overall, the proactive awareness rather than reactive accommodation would be the way to go. For example, I think we should, avoid scheduling annual conferences or big days, important days, institutional events during Ramadan days. I think it's just a month in the year. So I think awareness of avoiding those would be great. If there's an event that involves faculty or student during Ramadan, I would appreciate normalizing brief prayers times because the
Right.
day, especially in winter when the day is short, really prayers can be missed. In a 2 or 3 hours meeting, you can miss prayers if you don't have that break built in for you. And it's just like any wellness need, really.
Right.
Another thing is, I know SLC started to do that already, including major religious observations in or observances in institutional calendars
Right.
is key. And I think most institutions now doing this, but many people do not go to the calendar and see that. So I think there has to be some sort of announcement, even in an email. I mean, we get global
Yeah.
emails for many different reasons.
Yes.
Why not we get from the head of the organization, we starting Ramadan next week, happy Ramadan or something.
Yes.
Why
I
not?
love that. I love that idea. I think that's such a powerful yet very simple and doable suggestion, for when we look at the complexion of our college. And if we know that we have, a number of Muslim faculty and students, I think sending an email, a collective email to the entire college of group, with well wishes to observe Ramadan, I think that could be a very powerful moment to have folks feel seen and supported.
Absolutely. And then for students, our poor students, if they have a class, a long class, I know in evening classes are becoming to be more of a trend now because of the scheduling
Yes.
issues. Students will appreciate having maybe some dates on site when they
Yes.
have classes that overlap with the iftar times. I think they would appreciate that, especially that it's actually, could be dangerous for some people, to stay longer hours, longer than the time for breakfast without having something to eat. And that I think would be a nice gesture.
Yes. Well, these are great suggestions that, again, do not require a lot of system level needs that in terms of, support and money. And I think could be very doable both within our union collective and also at the college. So thank you for sharing those. Well, as we come to the end of our conversation today, I'm wondering if you could please share some um, supportive Arabic words or phrases, or even just introduce us to some key Arabic words and phrases that are used during Ramadan. If we want to wish a colleague a happy Ramadan, if you could talk a little bit about Eid and what the significance of Eid is and how we would support and provide well wishes to our fellow faculty colleagues and to our students.
Well, I love that. So I think there are commonly known phrases. Those are Ramadan Mubarak or Ramadan Kareem. I like Ramadan Kareem in particular because it's just Kareem in Arabic means generous Ramadan. And I totally believe this is a month of generosity, and emphasizing that will help connections a bit more. So Ramadan Kareem, that's an easy one. And honestly, just saying, I hope Ramadan is going well for you, or how is the fasting going? I think those would be great. But in the Egyptian language, we have a bit more, fancy words, if you will. We say, كل سنة وانت طيب. I mean, it's a bit more phrases to the sentence, but it means really I'm wishing you well for this month and for the years to come as well. So those are some of the things that hopefully people can use. But like I said, if you just wish people, just making people aware that, yeah, we recognize that you're fasting now would mean a lot to people who are fasting.
Okay. Beautiful. Ramadan Kareem, Maha.
Thank you so very much, Ekta.
And when is Eid?
So this is very important. So basically, these are 30 days of doing the exact same thing every day. And it's pretty tedious and can be tiring, especially at the last week. So the Eid comes at the end as a celebratory, natural celebratory event, which means you've done it. You've completed the task. You did not miss a day, especially if you had that hyper awareness during the day and you controlled your tongue, you controlled your feelings and temper. You really have a big success. So that's what the 3 days after Ramadan are about. The first day is very important. So we appreciate by SLC, by colleagues, by everybody in the institution, give us that day. Don't schedule anything in the beginning because we have a special prayer in the morning, but also it's a time for, celebrating our task completion. We need to relax and we need to have our first morning breakfast, true breakfast after 30
Yes.
days.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing. We gather with people, celebrate with each other, have, of course, nice meals that we were not able to do during the month, and some extra sweets here and there. It's also something nice and mark. But yeah, the first day is more important, I would say. It is 3 days in Islam, but myself and many others, we just work during those 3 days. So what we're asking is at least the first day, even half a day, if it's formally, as some sort of time off, would be amazing.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And, in terms of that celebration, it would be appropriate to say Eid Mubarak.
Yes, that is
Yes.
correct.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I do hope that our paths can cross so we can celebrate and share. And again, part of our role is to also create awareness around the significance of Eid and provide, supportive and celebratory words and gestures to our colleagues. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Thanks again for having me.
And now it's time for another edition of Member Spotlight.
In this week's Member Spotlight, we're turning to two colleagues you may have seen in the news recently. Nursing faculty Julie Dyke and Andrea Rochon were awarded NSERC, or Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, grant to bring a new project to life, and the work they're doing has real implications for faculty across our system. They're going to walk us through what that funding makes possible, what they're building, and what they've learned along the way. And if you've been thinking about a project of your own or wondering how the College and Community Social Innovation Funds, affectionately called COCO CIF funding, might support your ideas, their experience may be exactly the roadmap you've been looking for. All right, so I am really thrilled to have you guys with me today. And what I'd like to start with is a little bit of an overview in terms of kind of your experience with St. Lawrence College. So, Andrea, do you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Julie. I have been teaching at St. Lawrence College for almost 5 years. I currently teach in the Bachelor of Science in Nursing program on the Kingston campus. I've been at the college for almost 5 years, and I teach across all 4 years of the program, mostly in the first and third years, but have had the opportunity to teach across the 4 years of the program.
Okay, great. And Julie, what about you?
So I've been at college since 2005 when we first collaborated with Laurentian University with the Bachelor of Science in Nursing program at that time. And so I've been around for a while, and I've dabbled in all kinds of stuff. I teach in year 1 and 3. I've coordinated off and on during these years, and I came to the college, at a time where things were moving quite a bit in terms of nursing education, and I have to say it hasn't stopped since then because we're always evolving, and our program is really moving ahead with all kinds of different aspects. We have our own standalone program now, and with many different specialties that we run on the different campuses, and so it's been busy, and it's been great to see how nursing education is continuing to evolve over all this time. Always exciting.
All right. And research is an incredibly important part of nursing. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you got involved in doing research and what that means?
Well, for us in the nursing program, because we're accredited by the Canadian Association of School Nursing, it's part of our standard to participate in research. We call it scholarship. So there's different types of scholarship that you can participate in. For example, scholarship of teaching, where you're going to be taking a look at what you do in the teaching aspect of your job and assessing the effects of that teaching and your strategies to see if it has the outcome that you're looking for or not, and if not, then how you can improve. And so part of our role with the nursing school is to develop that piece of our practice. And so we have faculty who have been involved with scholarships since the very beginning, and we have a very strong scholarship presence at the college in many aspects. And we run a conference every year as well to showcase the scholarship that's been done by the faculty, but also the students, which is part of that. So that's how we got involved in nursing research. I mean, with our studies, we also do our thesis with the master's and PhD. So it's always something that we learn as nurses to conduct. So this is part of our job. And I think for Andrea and I, we have always been interested in doing this stuff. And
I think it's really important. We talk a lot about using evidence in our practice in nursing. And so doing research and engaging with research is certainly part of that. And I came to the college just as I was finishing one of my graduate degrees. And so I was really keen to participate in research in various capacities within the college. And fortunately, when I was hired, one of our former colleagues had started a research project that really was sort of the beginnings of the project we're now working on. So she invited me to join that team at that time. And when she moved on to another role, I sort of stepped into leading the project, and then Julie came on, and now we've been co-leading this project for a few years in various iterations. So again, when the opportunity to actually apply for funding to really support this almost as a research program came up last year, Julie took the lead on preparing this application, and we were able to, in collaboration with our community partners, to submit this application, and we hope really have an impact on nursing education and research and hopefully policy.
And this is a huge feather in the cap of the college.
COCO CIF funding is specifically for colleges across Canada, and many colleges in Ontario and other provinces have been applying to this particular fund for quite a few years. St. Lawrence College have really not taken that opportunity at this point, and so we have, and we've been successful in that application. So it's not, this funding is for colleges, and it is for applied research where colleges, this is where we can provide a lot of research expertise and developing that research agenda, because we are very close to our communities and most of the research that we do is very much applied. And so there was a little box that we actually fit, and we were able to submit an application that was successful. So I think for our college, it's new to our college, but it's not new to other colleges across the country to apply and be successful in this particular grant.
And Andrea, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what's the kernel research that you were working on?
The overarching theme of all of this research wanted for enhancing nursing student clinical placements in long-term care homes with the hopes that it will support recruitment and retention in that sector after graduation. So initially, the team started working on really just a literature review or a scoping review to see what was out there, what had already been done in terms of research around this topic. And then when Julie and I came on board, we did a survey of nursing students because we wanted to hear what their experiences were, what the perceptions were of having clinical placements in this sector, so that we could start to understand where they were coming from and perhaps where some of the needs or the gaps were that we could potentially address in future sort of intervention or implementation research work. So we worked with community partners, and we've had sort of some long-standing community partners, and the Center for Learning and Research and Innovation in Long-Term Care, some of the local long-term care homes, and then now other province-wide or provincial organizations like the Ontario Long-Term Care Association and Advantage Ontario, who have come on board to support us. And what we want to do now is develop a model or a collaborative model with all these partners and hopefully others, where we can provide recommendations for various groups or sort of primary engagers in this work to enhance the student experience. So recommendations for schools of nursing, recommendations for staff and administrators at long-term care homes, for clinical instructors, various people who are involved in the nursing student placement, provide them with some recommendation that might enhance nursing student placement. And then ultimately, the second part, and Julie could probably speak to it a little bit more, is we're also going to develop, as we do this work, a social media campaign.
So our goal is to increase the interest in long-term care for nursing students as a career goal. And so the first pillar, as Andrea mentioned, will be looking at enhancing the experience of nursing students so that they perceive long-term care as a potential career choice when they graduate. But the second pillar it was a bit of an aha moment where, and now I understand it as it's a concept of dissociation, where you take two ideas that are not necessarily the same from the same sector or from the same frame of reference. And so we're using that shortage of nursing or nurses in long-term care, and we associate it with the influence that social media can have on that particular population or that target group. And we're going to use this in relationship with strategies that the Johnson & Johnson Foundation has used in their approach to recruiting nurses in the nursing profession. And so combining those ideas was a bit of our aha moment, where we said, okay, now we have this major shortage of nurses. And you mentioned COVID-19, the aftermath of that, meaning that we need to look at long-term care. And there's been really good initiatives to support more staffing in long-term care, but we've never really targeted nursing students to say, here's what long-term care can provide you as a career opportunity. And this is why long-term care is important. So we're using social media to kind of reframe that perspective from younger nurses or nurses who are getting into their career to shape their perspective in a positive way about long-term care as a rewarding choice for nursing students. So this is really that part where we're using two different sectors or two different frame of mind to make a change. And I think for COCO CIF, that's what they were looking for. They were looking for innovative ideas to address social issues. And when we talk about colleges, this is where we do a lot of our work, and we can get funded to do that stuff. And so I thought that was very interesting. So that's how we got to develop that. And one of the nice pieces of COCO CIF is that we involve nursing or students in general in the process of that research. And so we have our research assistants are learning how to develop research ethic boards, application, protocols for research, surveys, how to collect information, how to analyze it. And then we have a series of conferences where we're going to be presenting this information as a dissemination strategy.
Excellent. And do you have a kind of a timeline that you're looking at?
Yeah, so we were fortunate to receive funding for a 3-year project. So it's sort of going to be a multi-year, multi-phased project. And we have things sort of generally outlined for what those 3 years will look like. But for the first year, in terms of pillar 1, where we're looking to gather some information and insight from people and then work to develop and refine this model, what we're hoping is, this is a province-wide initiative, right? So we're looking to engage hopefully about 1/3 of long-term care homes in Ontario, about 1/3 of the schools of nursing. There are just over 600 long-term care homes in Ontario. So we're hoping this will be a big project, and we genuinely want to hear from everyone if we can. So there will be invitation for about 1/3 of both of those groups to participate in surveys and or interviews or focus groups where they can share their perspectives. And we want to hear not just from administrators of long-term care homes and nursing programs, so their feedback is invited and welcomed and important. We also want to hear from the frontline staff, from clinical instructors, and the people who are really right there supporting the students, mentoring them, observing what they're and what they're hearing. Sometimes those are the people that nursing students feel comfortable sharing things with, right? They're sort of right in the trenches, if you will, with them. And so we're hoping to, again, distribute these surveys, conduct these interviews so that we can collect that data, develop and sort of refine our initial model. And then in the second year, do sort of the same thing. So with the information that we've collected, perhaps tweak our questions, perhaps kind of change things. What do we now need to gather in order to develop further recommendations or refine them, invite the next sort of third or the next wave of participants in. And then really by the time we get to the end of this, we want to be able to start to do some implementation. Part of this, the funding, but also our intention with this project is not that just we're sort of doing this high level academic type of study all the way through. This is why we want to involve people. So we would like to get a subset of our participants, nursing homes, schools of nursing, to be willing to implement some of these recommendations. So if we say, okay, this is how we suggest perhaps nursing students receive orientation, so they're really well prepared to go into a long-term care home. Is there a group that would take that on, that we maybe would develop orientation or do an orientation that perhaps we propose and then do some evaluation? So the scope of the project will end up being big, but we really want it to be meaningful and have that continued engagement with these community partners so that it really is relevant and hopefully something that can be implemented province-wide and potentially nationwide, right? Knowing that, as Julie said, we know there's a shortage of nurses wanting to go into this sector or who sort of stay in the sector sometimes when they start. So can we really enhance that nursing student experience so they understand the meaningful work that nurses do in long-term care and really the great skill set they need, right? We see nurses in long-term care who really need to be strong leaders and have complex critical thinking skills and provide complex clinical care, and really working on developing those deep and meaningful relationships with residents and families. So that skill set is so important to consider and isn't always perhaps emphasized or understood really by students, by the general public even sometimes. So that's part of that social media campaign where we can talk about this, talk about really what nurses in that sector are doing now and the important care they're providing to people mostly, in later years of their life and valuing that. So like I say, it's going to be sort of a 3-year study at least, and hopefully we'll get maybe funding beyond that if we can continue this work. But we do have, say, ambitious goals that we're hoping to achieve by the end of the 3 years.
And I should have asked this earlier. When you say nursing, are you meaning primarily RNs, or are you looking at RPNs?
RPNs as well. Yeah. So RPNs and RNs at this point, and not to say that obviously PSWs play a critical role in the care of residents in long-term care homes. For the purpose of this project, we're likely to maintain our focus on RPNs and RNs in that regulated nursing role, but not to say that this won't scope and spread beyond that to other care providers in the homes as well.
This is excellent. And in terms of at the end of this, is there anything personally that you hope to see?
Well, I think for us, the main goal is to provide more staffing in long-term care across Ontario and hopefully nationally in terms of because our campaign, our social marketing campaign, we're starting next year. We're preparing the campaign now, and then we're launching in Ontario for the academic year 26-27, and then expanding nationally 27-28. And so the goal as well for us is to reframe how much value we put in the care of older adults. I think as a society, we have to rethink that and to frame it so that we see the benefits and the rewards of a career that would be part of caring for older adults that have worked all their life and now they need our care. And I think it's a deep human experience that students can develop or nurses in their career. Long-term care has changed quite a bit over the last few years. And so it does take a high level of skills. As I said, deep human connections, understanding the evolution of the human development. And so I think it's important for us to kind of reframe that as a society and put value back in caring for older adults so that we have more nurses choosing long-term care as a career goal. We know social marketing, our social media does influence people's attitudes, behavior, and perspectives. And I think that's one way we can do that to put the value back in caring for older adults.
It's also changed a lot where I'll say historically or previously, people who became very sick who were residents of long-term care home would often be transferred out to an emergency department or an acute care facility. And now the expectation is often that the nurses working in long-term care will care for those people in their homes, essentially. And so the need for those nurses to have very acute assessment skills and ability to intervene given the resources they may have, which may be limited. They may be the one or two healthcare providers in that building at the time. So they really need to have strong skills sort of across those domains that I mentioned. And we want to emphasize that too, right? The importance of that. And again, how meaningful the work that is done there can be and the opportunity sort of for growth in those sectors and developing their own skills sort of professionally throughout a career and not just as sort of a landing point as a new graduate, but where they can really develop and make a difference.
Received close to $360,000 for this grant, and we do have just going to check. We have about another 300,000 from in kind from our partners. So this is major funding. It's very impressive in terms of funding, and a lot of the funding is as we said goes towards research assistance and dissemination, etc. There's a bit of money to offload the faculty from courses so that they're able to work on the project, etc. So, but it's quite impressive in terms of funding, and it supports a lot of what we're looking to do.
Yeah, and you're going to be supporting a few student jobs kind of in this?
Yeah. 3 to 5 research assistants a year, which is, really exciting to have them. Right. And part of this grant is that we support student learnings. Right now we have 3 undergraduate students from both the PN and BSCN programs, which is really exciting. So not only do they bring a voice and their own experiences from their clinical placements, but also they're in it, right? They use social media, they're interested in clinical placements. They really are a passionate group that have been very keen to move this work forward and I think excited to learn along with us. So that has been a really exciting piece of what we're doing as well.
Awesome. And if any of our listeners want to kind of follow along on social media, where do they find you guys? Are you out
Stay
there
tuned.
yet?
Stay tuned, Julie.
That's a good question. We actually have partnered with a marketing company to brand the project, and so we're going to see our first iteration of our name and brand next week. And so once we have that, we're going to be out on the different platforms. But Andrea and I are on LinkedIn. We'll be out there sharing quite a bit in different venues. But I think connecting directly with us if you're interested to join as a research participant or share your perspective, we're more than happy to connect with you. The other piece we were thinking about as well is if faculty are interested in applying for a COCO CIF grant, to reach out. This is a grant that is specifically for colleges, and although the application process is a bit complex because there's, you have to show that you have partners, that you have a good budget, that you have ideas that for innovation. It has to connect with a social issue or a community-based issue. And so I think it's important for us to showcase. We do this at the college, we do this. And so might as well get paid for running those projects. There is, you plan ahead. Obviously, you have to start about 6 months ahead of time to really lay out everything that you need for your application. You need approval from upper level management, obviously, because they're going to be part of managing the funds and hiring people and all those pieces. You need to make your associate dean aware of what your plans are. But it is feasible. I think many of us are doing research or scholarship that absolutely meets the criteria for the COCO CIF, and I would welcome people to reach out if they're interested to give this a try. I think for me, when we first started this, we said, okay, what's a good return rate on application? And I think research groups, if they have like a 10-20% return rate on applications, they are very successful. And so our college applied for 2 last year and we got 1. So we were at 50% success rate,
awesome.
which is, we can put that into our report, right? But those grants, I think we have to look at as a college or as a team to say, okay, the more we apply, the more we'll get funding, right? If you never apply, you can't complain you don't get funding. But the more you apply, the better you are at doing them, the more success you'll get at receiving the funding. So I think for us we can do this. It's a matter of pulling our resources together and getting it done, for sure.
Right. And certainly being able to have kind of conversations about ideas. Your water cooler spans from Cornwall to Kingston. So how do you get together and kind of have those conversations?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of our work online collaboratively, and I think we're lucky in the nursing program. We do a lot of collaborative work. We have tri-campus teams because we teach the programs across the 3 campuses. So there is already a lot of engagement, I would say. But Julie and I have been fortunate. We've continued to work closely. We have a few other sort of peers and members across the 3 campuses who sort of are working with us as well. And so the best way has been to just have scheduled meetings online. We try to keep weekly or biweekly meetings where we can just do that touch base. And it seems to work well for us at this point. We're planning an official project launch event in person in Kingston in May, where we're going to invite all of our sort of community and provincial partners to come, the student research assistants, and have that opportunity to actually come together and have conversation and brainstorm and talk about what we're doing with the project. And just to sort of emphasize what Julie said about if people want to apply for this funding or put projects together. And again, I think across the 3 campuses, there are similar and different programs across the 3 campuses. We hear stories of different teams collaborating, and I think it's just taking that step to think, wow, this could be something big, right? You hear stories of sort of the nursing and the police foundations programs, for example, coming together to do little workshops or engagements, or paramedics and lab techs or whatever that might be, right? Healthcare administration. And so thinking about, wow, how could we make this sort of a bigger thing, right? A lot of community partners would be excited too, thinking about how we educate and support interprofessional learning, for example. So I think lots of opportunity if people are interested. Yes, it's work doing the grant applications. Yes, it's work to do research and to do these projects, but the benefit, and I think of making a cohesive faculty team, of supporting student learning, I think lots of really neat opportunity looking for any of these grants or opportunities to work together.
I love it. And it's a good thing the snow's melting because I think you've just planted a number of seeds.
1 year or two.
Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you ladies would like to add? This has been fantastic, by the way.
I would say, you've asked about how do you do this over 3 campuses, et cetera. And I was thinking about, we've always done this. We've always collaborated across the 3 campuses, and even with many other colleges and Laurentian University when we were in collaboration with them. And so working online across different geographic locations is kind of something we've done for the last 21 years. So for me, the question was like, well, we get it done. But I think for us, it speaks to the fact that the nursing group is very cohesive. You don't happen to just produce this stuff. It's all about collaboration and partnership and trusting that, everyone's gonna pull the same way, the same direction. So anyways, we're hoping that this is going to inspire other faculty to look at funding, maybe this one or maybe other types of funding to support their research and look at things a bit differently. Because sometimes these funding applications make you think about partners, students, across Ontario or across Canada. And so it pushes you to look at things in a different perspective. And I think that's what we were able to do with this particular grant. Very excited, and we're looking forward to see how this is going to pan out in the next few years.
Thank you for the opportunity to share this. Again, Julie and I are obviously excited about this particular grant and the project we're working on, but also excited about connecting with other faculty who want to talk about research or talk about ideas. And I think that's also what this is about, right? It's about ideas. It's about the idea of working together in different capacities, right? It doesn't just have to be that siloed, like nurses do this and welders do this. There are ways that people can really come together, and you might be in different sectors, but sometimes we're kind of doing something similar, right? Or using different frameworks, but may not know it. So I think it's this just a different way for faculty to come together and connect over things.
You've been listening to CAAT Tales, stories that matter to faculty and beyond. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Visit slcfaculty.ca and stay connected with us on social media.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policies, positions, or statements of OPSU, CEFPO, St. Lawrence College, or any affiliated organizations. This podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. While every effort is made to ensure accuracy, SLC Faculty Local 417 makes no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, about the completeness, reliability, or suitability of the information shared. Any reliance placed on such information is strictly at the listener's own risk. Music and sound effects used in this podcast are licensed or royalty-free. We respect copyright law and encourage our listeners to do the same.